We're going to move on to the next presentation, which is by Ashmi Bunsy. She's also from the Tropical Island Biodiversity Ecology and Conservation Group at the University of Mauritius. And she's going to talk to us about conservation challenges of an endangered endemic insectivorous bat species on Mauritius Island.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon from wherever you're joining me, and thank you, Bat Without Borders, for organizing this. I'm just trying to figure out how to share my screen. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you very much. That's ready.
Wonderful. So, hi again, I'm Ashmi. So I'll try to be super quick. I'm going to talk about the, wait, I'm just going to get rid of that. I'm going to talk about the conservation challenges of an endangered endemic insectivorous bat species on Mauritius Island. So briefly, I will introduce the island bat specificities and Mauritius as a conservation lab, the aim of my MPhil PhD research, some of the methods that I use to answer some ecological questions, some of the preliminary results, which are really cool. We'll discuss the ecological interpretations of these results, and then we'll finally conclude on some applications and recommendations. So we all know that everything else on islands, bats are highly threatened. They're often the sole native insular mammals to be able to reach and colonize islands. But even then, 25% are endemics, and majority of them are threatened. And islands, bats, especially on islands, they provide key ecosystem services such as seed dispersal, pollination, and insect pest control, which we will concentrate mostly on the third one. So of these islands, Mauritius has all the ingredients to be a microcosm of the world. It's part of a biodiversity hotspot. It has disproportionately high level of endemism, but also intensive human pressures. Now, from this picture here, the first one, tiny one, you can see that Mauritius was covered with forests with a lot of functioning ecological functions still intact, but now Mauritius resembles a bit like this, very urbanized and areas of low productivity. And indeed, Mauritius has been one of the last countries to be colonized, but yet it is one of the most ecologically devastated islands, places on the world. And this has this colonization has triggered this intensive habitat destruction, which has been the cause of many extinctions, not just for bats, but for plants, reptiles, birds, snails. And again, the same story goes on for bats. So we lost already 2 species of fruit bats. One is globally extinct and one is locally extinct. It survives still in Rodrigues Island. And as Gitika just wonderfully presented, we have fruit bat remaining, which is the Mauritius fruit bat, and it's been culled since 2015. But the unknown side of the story is that we have 2 little heroes, 2 little insectivorous bats on Mauritius. One is the Mauritius tomb bat, which is native, and the Mauritius red-tailed bat. And this is where I step in. So there's been a lot of conservation action. There's been a lot of research on the Mauritius fruit bat in the last few decades. But however, there's not been much research done on insectivorous bats. So this is a really nice niche opportunity to do research on insectivorous bats in Mauritius. So I chose the Mauritius red-tailed bat as a model to study threatened island bats. To introduce the little bat, it's insectivorous. An adult is 6 to 8 grams. It's endemic to Mauritius. Very little is known about its ecology. I might answer most of your questions by I don't know. And it's endangered on the IUCN Red List. So this is a colony of Mauritius red-tailed bat. They usually roost, they have gregarious roosting habits. So they usually roost between a few hundreds to even a few thousands. So unfortunately, like everything else, it has undergone a multi-decadal decline throughout Mauritius. And the thing is, we don't know why. There are some potential drivers of decline. First is pesticide overuse. The species is insectivorous. Because while Mauritius is first worldwide in pesticide use per kilometer square of cropland, for such a tiny country, we use a lot of pesticide. And this use has undergone a fivefold increase over the past half century, so it's not going down, on the contrary. And there's also some human disturbances to the roosting sites of this species, which brings me to my first objective. I was like, hey, where are these bats? So where are these roosts distributed? What type of roost do they roost? What type of roost do they use? And has there been any change in the types of roosts they use? And do they actually select certain roosts based on certain variables? So this has been a wonderful collaboration with one of an amazing woman, Ophélie. She's on the right here. So what we did is we compared the roost distribution through time. We did some island-wide surveys. We used personal communications. We asked people around caves, hey, do you know about bats? Have you seen bats? Do you know bats? We also measured dimensions of the caves, like entrance, height, width, stuff like that. And we also did a quick comparison with the sister species, which is in Reunion Island. So what we found was quite interesting. So on Reunion, which is not very far from Mauritius, the Momopterus there is highly adapted to urban areas. So they use tunnels, bridges, kiosks as roosting sites, as well as caves, but mostly in urbanized areas. However, what we found in Mauritius is that the Momopterus, so the free-tailed bat, is a picky one. It roosts only in caves. You're not going to find it anywhere else. It roosts only in caves. And what we also found is we did a quick comparison from the past distribution and the present distribution. We found that, hey, they are pretty stable. I found a few more roost as well, but the species is still endangered, which brings us to, are they choosing certain caves, or is there anything that makes a good cave for them? So for such a tiny bat, what we found that the cave dimensions actually, so the size actually seems to matter. So hopefully we get this these results out this year. And by doing this, by doing the systematic surveys, we found a lot of disturbances to the caves. So since the species is restricted to caves in Mauritius, we were like, okay, let's look at the caves. Well, for Mauritius, unfortunately, there's been a lot of caves that has been documented. They are called as environmentally sensitive areas, but unfortunately, what happens is in caves and the roosting sites of these bats is quite horrible to see, which brought us to a second objective, was to like, what happens to those last roosting sites of the bats? So are there any disturbances there? So what we did, we randomly compared caves with and without bats. There we assessed the diversity, the intensity of human threats, and we also categorize what types of disturbances actually goes on in the cave of these bats. So again, an amazing collaboration with an amazing woman. What we found was quite interesting. So in terms of biotic disturbances, we found cats, domesticated cats that goes inside the caves, and they then prey upon the bats, but also there are swiftlets that are inside those caves. So we have cats, we have also human disturbances such as vampires, poles that are used for poaching, so they put fires again. There are black magic practices, you've got worship places underneath the bats, you've got light pollution, you've got camping that goes on. We found drug usage inside the caves, and also there are parties that goes on inside the caves. But probably the worst of all is sewage. discharge inside the caves, and these are caves that have bats in it. And yeah, that's a lovely picture. That's sewage input that is constantly dumped inside the caves where the bats are roosting. So we also found that these disturbances are concentrated at the cave entrances and also under day holes. So these are natural openings in the cave ceiling that has collapsed. And from there, people just dump stuff and they put on fires and they burn the whole cave. So we also try to find the correlation between the disturbance diversity and the accessibility to these caves. We scored the percentage of urbanization within 100 and 200 radii from these caves. And then we also assessed the land tenure. So what we found was quite interesting. So we saw that caves that are closer to roads, so which facilitates access to these caves, are more impacted by disturbances. And we also saw that the urbanization level positively correlates with disturbances diversity. So with more urbanization around the cave, you have more disturbances to the caves. And we also found that these caves that are found on private lands, they have more disturbances than those that are found on state lands. So what does this mean? We saw that there's spatiotemporal variation in disturbances to these roosting sites. These cave entrances and day holes are easy access for illegal dumping in Mauritius, so we could probably implement bat-friendly gates. And also, unfortunately, one cave has been closed because of the persistent dumping at the cave opening. And this cave used to hold one of the largest colony of swiftlet, probably bats as well. We don't know because this cave has been closed. And there are so many threats to these caves that are still not being assessed so far by the local authorities. And to conclude on this part, we see that caves that are in close proximity to urban areas are not doing well, and this situation is going to worsen. There's going to be more pressure on cave ecosystems, not just the bats, but also everything that is associated with the bats and the caves. And there's also an urgent need in Mauritius to implement laws on rubbish disposal and also to legally protect these caves, because so far they're not legally protected. So, and then we are, I've also done some sort of spatial temporal foraging patterns on the species. So we wanted to just determine the maximum fly distance and the foraging habitat preferences of these bats in a highly transformed habitat, which is Mauritius, because Mauritius right now is a highly transformed island. We wanted to look at how far can they go? Are they having any preferences, and are there any sort of patterns in terms of their nightly foraging behaviors? So what we did is we preliminarily deployed some audiomorphs in different habitat types. For the moment, we deployed them in sugarcane, riparian areas, towns, urban areas. We haven't been able to deploy them in forests right now. So for this part, we haven't been able to deploy them in forests. But even then, you can see on the picture, so the red circle is where the cave is. You can see it's in a highly urbanized areas. And then we randomly deploy these audiomorphs in the different habitat types. And even from such a small and short study, we found some interesting results. So most of the back passes and feeding buzzes were recorded in sugarcane areas and the riparian areas, and clearly avoiding the urban areas. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to detect any night variation in their temporal patterns in foraging. But indeed, that was a very short study. And now the idea is to push forward and try to get some data. But interestingly, at dusk, when they start to emerge, we would expect feeding passes and bat passes to be low, actually, which is seen by both sugarcane and urban areas. However, they were both quite substantial in the rivers. So in the riverine areas, something is happening. So all the bats are just converging there for some reason unknown. So this is answers more, it opens doors for more questions, which is exciting. So what does this mean? We saw that there was some special variations in the foraging patterns. We found higher bat activity and feeding in the sugarcane fields in the riparian areas. This could be that that eases maneuverability for the bats, and the productivity level is quite high in sugarcane areas and riparian areas compared to the urbanized areas. Could be because of the irrigation. So these are fertilized areas with optimal insect availability to the bats. And also for the riparian areas, it could be because there's reduced probability of lack of water shortages. And indeed, this has been shown in a few studies before. And again, we saw that there's a clear avoidance of the urban areas, and it could be a hypothesis could be that it could be due to noise pollution, the low productivity that characterizes urbanized areas, and also a lack of water sources. And this has been shown in various studies as well. So again, this is the first study that investigated the foraging patterns of Mauritius tuberculosis. Again, this urbanization level does not seem to do well for insectivorous bats in Mauritius. So we could eventually use passive acoustic monitoring elsewhere that has similar settings as Mauritius, and understanding the foraging patterns would be vital to preserve or restore habitats that could support bats populations, especially those that are closer to caves, but also in agricultural areas, and especially in large monocultures that uses a lot of pesticide. So now the next step of my PhD is to replicate these deployments. I'm also going to do some insect sampling, and we're also going to incrementally deploy the audiomorphs from the cave to get an idea of their maximum foraging distance. And again, this has been a wonderful collaboration with another wonderful woman. Just right now, we are in the whole process of deploying those audiomorphs. And finally, I would like to thank all these people. Like, seriously, this is a big collaboration with all these institutions. And a really big thank you to the field team who have been by my side, and a lot of amazing women, but a lot of amazing men as well. So I will end here, and hopefully you have a lot of questions, or maybe not. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Ashmi, for an impressive presentation, so much work that you've done, and so many more questions to address. So yeah, good luck with the rest of the research. There's a question, and we just have time for one quick question. Priscilla Irana says, there is a trend, especially in Mauritius, to deem that for a place to be protected, someone has to be able to gain from it. So we get plans for geoparks and other ecotourism type activities. What is your take on using tourism as a means to incentivize cleanup and protection of those caves?
Okay, sorry, maybe I missed some parts of it. I'm trying to get it on the chat. Okay, there's a trend, especially What is your take on using tourism as simple? Wonderful question, Priscilla. Thanks so much. Well, honestly, we haven't really delved into the tourism type of activities so far, but if there's this feasibility of getting tourists or even the local communities to go into caves, of course, in restricted numbers, with all the necessary precautions so as not to disturb the wildlife that is in there. So the biodiversity. Definitely, I think it could be something that could work. It could actually, it not only incentivizes people, but in my experience, a lot of people don't know that these caves are habitats for bats, for birds, for so many invertebrates. So even before I started my PhD, I didn't even know the bat existed. It's only meeting people and getting to work on the field that I've discovered this amazing niche of it's a treasure actually. And by doing this, to come back to your question, I think if we incentivize people, tourists, local communities, schools, about the importance of caves, not only for the biodiversity, but also for themselves, it increases the value, I guess, of a community, of an area, and it can bring tourists to this area, and you can make guided, I don't know, cave-backed activity is some sort of this thing, and I'm pretty sure it will work, definitely. So I hope that answers your question, Priscilla. So yeah.
Thank you, Ashmi. That's incredible work. Well done again, and thank you for sharing with us. I'm going to hand over to Rachel now, just for some closing remarks, as we're running a little bit over time.
I'd just like to thank Wildlife Acoustics for sponsoring this event today, and also a big shout out to the Rufford Foundation. As you'd heard, Helen Taylor-Boyd being mentioned in Zambia by Katendi. You know, it's fantastic to see. So Rufford Foundation fund a lot of conservation in developing countries. So please do check out their website, and actually same with Aurora, based in Nigeria. So also just to kind of thank our speakers, who have really showcased a wonderful array of talks, incredibly inspiring women. And, you know, this is just a fantastic shout out, obviously, to these incredible women who've made this event possible. So thank you very much. It takes a lot of time and effort putting all this, obviously doing all their work, but actually in amongst their busy schedules preparing this presentation. So we really appreciate it. And obviously helping us to celebrate International Women and Girls in Science Day. So as part of that, I also wanted to give a shout out to all the incredible women working on bat science around the world as well. And, you know, and also just to echo what Katendi said about, you know, we really want more women, certainly more women in bat science. Certainly from Southern Africa, when I was based in Malawi, we had some workshops and we struggled to get women in, and we struggled to get students, you know, female students. So again, you know, really trying to support, you know, our women. And I loved Gatita's message on saying, you know, it's actually we've been inspired by obviously humans and non-humans, and as Ashmi said, obviously you know, men as well as women. But it really is nice to showcase. We've seen some fantastic women mentors. And you know, it's also inspiring seeing, you know, researchers like Anika, who's actually going and working, you know, on an important issue on fire prevention that's really impacting livelihoods. And Ashmi, I must admit, I'm a big cave fan, so I was just so excited with your work. But I must admit, not quite as excited by all the poop in the cave. So a big star for you for that, if showing what women can do. So I also wanted to say a big thank you to my co-host Eliza. As I'd mentioned, she is one of our board members, but also a senior lecturer at the University of Stirling, and Paul Howden-Leach, who's also one of our board members, who's been behind the scenes helping with some of the tech for us, and of course the wonderful Ruth, who has helped to pull all of this together. But again, final thanks to our speakers. So thank you very, very much, everybody, for coming, and the lovely comments to the speakers. So Ruth will send those around to all of you, the speakers, because it is really nice to have that opportunity to read, you know, how amazing everybody finds your work. And thank you very, very much, everybody, for coming along today.